Hello and welcome to this video all about two legendary games, Final Fantasy X and its sequel, FF10-2. In this video we will go over 55 facts about the games that I hope you find interesting. These bits of information aren't presented in any particular order, and just in case you're watching this without having finished the games, needless to say there are many spoilers. Okay then, let's start with the star of the Zanuck and Apes, Tidus. One of Tidus's most striking features is his blonde hair, so it's surprising to consider that while the game was in development, his hair colour was actually much darker. At the Square Millennium event that was held in the year 2000, early footage of Final Fantasy X was shown, which revealed the black-haired Tidus running around an area that looks like the Calmlands. While the teaser trailer itself was only short, it also featured some clips of him exploring what looks like a basic version of one of the temples. It's interesting to consider that the footage that was shown seems so different to the final version, given that it was revealed only about a year or so before the game's release in Japan. Other differences between the early beta trailer and the final game include the fact that a different logo was displayed in the beta footage, while the in-game menu also looks more basic in comparison, and only shows portraits of Tidus and Yuna. Unfortunately, the available footage of the event is very rough, so it's hard to make out any more differences between what was shown and the finished version of Final Fantasy X. Even so, it makes you wonder when exactly it was decided to change his hair colour from black to blonde, to bring him closer to the theme of the sun, given that it's a key aspect of his character. In fact, Tidus' name originates from the Okinawan word Tida, which does literally mean sun. This also explains why the Sun Crest and Sun Sigil are used late in the game in order to get your hands on his celestial weapon, Kaladborg. While on the subject of his celestial weapon, let's take a look at the infamous chocobo racing minigame that's caused so much despair among Final Fantasy X fans over the years, unless you're one of the lucky ones who managed to beat it in not so many attempts. Even though it may seem like you can get your hands on the Sun Sigil if you hit exactly 0.00 seconds, that's not actually the case. Instead, you actually need to have done enough to finish the race with a time of -0.1 seconds or less in order to earn the sigil, just to make it that little bit more frustrating. However, there was a way of getting around this in the original Japanese PS2 version of the game, whereby the player could get the chocobo stuck by deliberately running into the edge of the pathway that leads down in the early stages of the race, and then keep it there until just before the timer runs out, before continuing with the race and deliberately taking a knock from a bird. If you were able to do it right, then you'd avoid getting hit by the birds in the following attempt. Once you had finally beaten the trainer and secured Tidus' Sun Sigil, you could find his sword in the northwest part of the Calmlands, which until then had been blocked by a rather unhelpful guy standing right in the way. However, if for some reason you chose to leave the area before you claimed Kaladborg for your own, the man would appear there again when you return, meaning you have to take on the trainer once more. Thankfully, you don't have to win the race. Instead, you just need to make sure that the phrase, "you already hold the record," shows up. Once it has, the pathway will open up for you again. Interestingly, while the name Kaladborg is used for his celestial weapon in the English localization of Final Fantasy X, this isn't the case in other versions. In the original Japanese version, as well as in the Italian and German versions, it is instead called Ultima Weapon, while this is further shortened to Ultima for the French localization. The Spanish version, however, saw the sword given the name of Arma Artima, which essentially means the same thing. Arma means weapon, while Artima is the name that was used for the Ultima spell. Another sword-related fact is that one of the designs used for Tidus' swords has the word Guardian inscribed on the blade, which is a pretty cool detail. Going back to the origins of Tidus as a character, it was revealed during an interview to mark the game's 20th anniversary that he didn't start out as a blitzball player. In fact, scenario writer Kazushige Nojima stated that he had originally intended for Tidus to be a hyperbaric welder, or in more general terms, an underwater plumber, in order to closely associate him with the game's water theme. Knowing Tidus as we do, it's pretty hard to imagine him as the Mario of the Final Fantasy universe. In the same interview, the game's director, Yoshinori Kitase, mentioned that it was his idea to have Tidus go from being a plumber to being an athlete. The overall reason for blitzball becoming a key element of Final Fantasy X's story was because sport hadn't really featured in the series much until that point in any major way, making it a refreshing thing to include. As such, Tidus was changed to make him a blitzball player, and he was given a more optimistic and happy-go-lucky attitude, which also made him stand out from certain protagonists which had come before, like Cloudstrife and Squall Leonhardt, who tended to be more stoic. However, Katase said that they chose to keep water as a motif because they wanted to see if they could do it, given that developers had usually avoided including water in games before then because of how difficult it was to get right. Regarding Tidus' outfit and appearance, character designer Tetsuya Nomura revealed that they followed a slightly different process for Final Fantasy X than they had done for previous games in the series. Until then, he had usually designed the characters first, before it had been worked out how they would actually feature in the game, but when it came to FF10 they decided on profiles for the characters before starting the design process. This is why Tidus' outfit still has a resemblance to something that a plumber or labourer might wear, in the sense of him wearing overalls, though Nomura did alter his appearance to also make it look more athletic and sporty. In terms of the way Tidus is portrayed to us, Nojima has said that he deliberately wanted to show him as being ignorant to the world around him, because that allowed him to be a vessel for us as we venture through Spira. His monologue throughout the game, where he tells us his inner thoughts and feelings, was made a major part of the narrative because Nojima wanted to focus on creating a connection between us, the players, and Tidus, the protagonist. In that way we learn more about Spira and its beliefs, as he does. Nojima had also originally intended for Tidus to be the character who would be revealed as being undead, or rather unsent, but decided to change this when the film The Sixth Sense was released in 1999 during the game's early development and featured a similar twist. Rather than drop the idea entirely, he decided that it would be Auron who would be unsent instead. The pronunciation of Tidus' name has been the cause of some debate over the years, mainly because it was never spoken out loud during Final Fantasy X itself, due to the fact that you can of course change his name if you wish to. Personally, after I had first played the game, I had always assumed that it was pronounced Tidus and not Tidus. However, as mentioned briefly earlier, the origin of his name is the Okinawan word Tida. It wasn't until he featured in Kingdom Hearts that his name was included in voice acting for the first time, where it's said by Wakka and pronounced as Tidus. James Arnold Taylor, his English voice actor, has told the story of how exactly the official pronunciation came about in a video on his channel. He said, "They made a trailer for the game after it had been made in Japanese, and they knew they were going to do an American version, so they hired an American narrator in Japan to narrate the trailer. And the narrator pronounced it Tidus, and pretty much everybody there, not really speaking much English, assumed that must be the proper way to pronounce it in English. And they put it out there and they said, well, that's how it was pronounced in the trailer, so that is the way you pronounce his name. So it is Tidus because a voice actor in Japan decided to pronounce it Tidus instead of Tidus. However, there is an anomaly. Even though most of the time since then, it has been pronounced as Tidus in other releases, such as Dissidia, Final Fantasy X Will, and World of Final Fantasy, that wasn't the case in Kingdom Hearts 2. Although Tidus doesn't even appear in the game, he is mentioned in a conversation when Selphie is talking to Kairi, and funnily enough on this occasion his name is pronounced as Tidus instead. However, this does seem to be something of an exception to the official pronunciation. Speaking of appearances in other games, Tidus, along with a number of other Final Fantasy characters, featured as a playable character in the wonderfully titled Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy in Itadaki Street Special, which was released in 2004. Unfortunately, the board game was never officially released outside of Japan, but as well as Tidus, it also included Yuna and Auron, as well as the Final Fantasy X-2 version of Riku along with Pain, and one of the available maps was based on the Thunder Plains. As well as Kingdom Hearts and Itadaki Street, Tidus has also featured in Square Enix Legend World, Puzzle & Dragons, and Monster Strike. Going back to James Arnold Taylor and his thoughts on the character he voiced, he said he views Tidus as an aggressive, excited young man. He wants to be right in every situation, he wants to be the hero. In terms of Tidus and Yuna's relationship, his view is that they are at two completely separate ends of the world when they first meet, with her being calm and cool and him being much more excited, but that she teaches him so much over the course of the story. Taylor also said that Tidus is motivated by her, as she makes him want to seek the truth even more and pull that excitement out of her. He wants to see her as excited about things and as energized as he is. These comments also align with the idea of Yuna and Tidus' personalities, representing the duality of yin and yang to an extent, which views the world as being made up of opposing but also complementary elements, such as the sun and moon, and inward energy and outward energy. The two forces are balanced and interwoven. Turning our attention to Final Fantasy X's emotional ending, there's a noteworthy difference to the way it plays out in Japanese and English. In the English localization, which was done by Alexander O. Smith, Yuna tells Tidus that she loves him, while in the Japanese version she instead says thank you. Speaking about the reasons behind making this change, Smith said in an interview that arigato and I love you can play very similar roles in their respective languages, and that the Western audience expects an outward declaration of love, even though that's un-Japanese. He pointed out that the lip movements for the two phrases happen to match pretty much perfectly, which also helped him to make the decision. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Smith mentioned that he checked with Nojima in order to get it signed off, knowing that it could prove to be quite a controversial change. Tidus shows up in Final Fantasy X-2 as an optional opponent that you can take on in the Farplane Cup, the most challenging tournament that features in the Fiend Arena. As well as him, it's also possible to run into other characters in the Fiend Arena who once fought alongside Yuna and Riku, namely Auron, Lulu and Kimahri, while Seymour also makes an appearance. By beating Tidus, Auron and Seymour during the cup, and winning it overall, you will be given the choice to recruit them, which is obviously pretty awesome. Now it's time to turn our attention to some facts about Yuna. Katase revealed in an interview that one of the early concepts, which ended up having some bearing on Yuna's story, centered around the notion that a person would reach the end of their life when they were just 17. While that concept wasn't taken any further, the theme of inevitability did of course feed into Final Fantasy X, and the seemingly inescapable fate that confronted Yuna. During the 20th anniversary interview, Nojima said that Yuna and Tidus' voice actors played an important role in helping to flesh out the characters and bring them to life. Yuna was voiced by Mayuko Aoki, while Tidus was voiced by Masakazu Morita. Final Fantasy X's event director Motomu Toriyama said that they worked alongside the voice actors to develop the characters during the process, rather than it being set in stone beforehand, as a result of it being their first venture into voice acting for the series. Toriyama also mentioned that Aoki and Morita had played a part in the development of Final Fantasy VIII, albeit in a different way. Morita had provided the motion capture elements for the character of Zell, while Aoki had done motion capture work for a number of characters, namely Rinoa and Edea, as well as for Garnet from Final Fantasy IX, and of course for Yuna. She is also credited as having done motion capture work for Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. As far as voice acting goes, as well as playing the part of Yuna, she has also voiced Selphie in Kingdom Hearts and the character of Seven in Final Fantasy Type 0. Regarding the process itself, Yoshinori Kitase said that, back when the game was recorded, it was usual to have the voice actors working together simultaneously. However, that has now changed, with actors doing their recording separately these days. Nojima also said that he was influenced by the way in which Aoki performed her lines, and that he decided to change the way Yuna spoke as a result in order to give her a more formal way of speaking. Sticking with the subject of voice acting, Yuna's English actor, Hedy Barres, said that she wanted to convey her sense of duty, respect and honour when she was performing the role, as these are the things that are important to Yuna, while also keeping the gentleness that Yuna has. Barres also said that she views Yuna's relationship with Tidus as being humanizing for her character, providing balance against her portrayal of being the duty-bound summoner. Knowing that Tidus' name has its origins in the Okinawan word for sun, what about the origins of Yuna? In the 20th anniversary interview, Nojima spoke about the influence that Okinawa had on him, saying that he had travelled there at around the same time as working on the game and that the experience remained with him vividly. He also said he learned the words Tida and Yuna during his visit, with Yuna being the Okinawan name for the flower commonly known as sea hibiscus. This also explains why her outfit features the flower prominently on her obi, the large sash used in traditional Japanese clothing for women, and on her skirt, as well as why her special dress sphere in Final Fantasy X-2 is floral falal. While looking at Yuna's design, Tetsuya Nomura mentioned that the game's art director, Naora Yusuke, had originally created some concept art that gave her a more Southern Asian type look. However, Nomura said that he wanted to give her design a more Japanese feel to it. Of course, Yuna's outfit is considerably different in Final Fantasy X-2, and the reason behind this change was explained by Tetsu Tsukamoto, the game's alternate costume designer, who said that while the first game had a darker, religious feel, there is a huge cultural change in the sequel, which naturally fed into the designs for the characters. Tsukamoto also mentioned that he found the songstress outfit the most challenging to design, while his favourite costume was the Dark Knight, given that he's a fan of armour and suits of armour. Many elements of Yuna's costumes in FF10-2 also pay homage to Tidus, most strikingly in the form of the Zanuck and Abe's logo that appears prominently on her main outfit throughout the game, the Gunner dress sphere. She also wields the iconic Brotherhood sword when dressed as the warrior, while she makes use of his celestial weapon when using the Dark Knight dress sphere. Reflecting on Final Fantasy X's famous kiss between Tidus and Yuna, Nojima explained that the finished version of the scene was very different to how he first envisioned it. In the version that he wrote originally, he said that Yuna interjected whenever Tidus was trying to put a positive spin on the situation, so in the end he kissed her instead. The idea to change the way the scene played out was put forward by Daisuke Watanabe, who was working as a scenario planner on the game, and while it was very different to his initial outline, Nojima said he loved the way it turned out. When it came to making the scene a reality, however, the director of visual works, Kazuyuki Ikumori, revealed the difficulties that his team faced along the way. He said, "For the Final Fantasy X kiss scene, a lot of our animators were not that experienced with romance. We were thinking, how do we make this look real? How do we make people get teary-eyed in that scene?" He also revealed that his female colleagues would often tell him that aspects of it looked unnatural or not believable or accurate while it was being worked on. "We remade this a lot of times because our female employees said, 'No, you guys don't get it.'" The Final Fantasy X Ultimania shows that one of the concepts for how the characters would get stronger was a tattoo system. The idea was that these tattoos could be placed on a grid, which would then allow the characters to increase their stats or learn new abilities. Yuna's tattoo would have been on her back, which is why her outfit was designed in a way that leaves her back visible. This also explains why certain characters, like Jecht, Seymour and Brother, have prominent tattoos in the game as a remnant of this concept. Interestingly, Yuna is not the only Final Fantasy character to have heterochromia, as this is a trait that she shares with Ravus from Final Fantasy XV. One particularly awesome piece of merchandise that was released to celebrate the launch of Final Fantasy X-2 in 2003 was a PS2 controller in the shape of Yuna's tiny bee pistols. Sadly, these awesome looking collectibles were only released in Japan. Yuna's rods were based on the design of the Kakada, a staff topped with metal rings that was carried by practitioners of Buddhism. The Kakada, or Shakujo, could prove to be a formidable weapon when used by an experienced Buddhist monk. Yuna doesn't use her rods in quite the same manner, however. Toriyama said that he put a lot of effort into ensuring that players wouldn't discover the endpoint of Yuna's pilgrimage until it is finally revealed, quite a long way into the game. The reason for this was so that, once the truth had been made clear, players would be able to replay the game with that awareness, and understand Yuna's words and actions in a new light. He also acknowledged that things are very different now though, as anyone can easily get story spoilers whenever they want, thanks to social media. It would be wrong to make a video like this and not spend some time looking at the famous, or perhaps infamous, laughing scene. Unsurprisingly, the localization director, Alexander O. Smith, has been asked about the scene in interviews, and whether or not it plays out the same way in English as it does in Japanese. His response is that it is indeed just as weird and stilted and out of place in the original version as it is in English, and that actually it could have turned out much worse had it not been for the voice actors they chose. In the interview, he talked about how he viewed it in the wider context of when it appears in the game, saying, "I hadn't ever really sat back and thought about the emotional impact of this scene. It's the lead up to the thing. I want my journey to be full of laughter." It's very melodramatic, but so much of Japanese drama is melodrama. I mean, I spend most of my time working on games, just trying to pull it back and make it more realistic. Taking that into account, Smith also said that he asked Nojima directly about the laughter and its purpose, saying, "What's going on, because this is very strange. What should I tell the actor? What's his motivation here?" To which Nojima said that he had basically put it in there because forced laughter is a thing he had been doing. He had been taking some acting classes, which was the reasoning behind its inclusion. However, Smith goes on to say that, while he still views it as an awkward funny scene in both languages, he sees it as being a successful translation of the Japanese version because it captures the same level of awkwardness. In a video on his channel, James Arnold Taylor has also given his take on the scene and how he performed it, saying, "It was written that way, it's supposed to be like that. It's part of the relationship of Yuna and Tidus getting to know each other." He added that even though he knows people have said it's bad acting, or that it's stupid and awkward, his response is, "Yeah, it is, it's supposed to be." He also revealed that he did the recording by himself, and that he never actually recorded anything in the studio at the same time as Yuna's voice actor, Hedy Barres. The iconic scene has, perhaps unsurprisingly, since been referenced in other Final Fantasy games. For instance, in Final Fantasy XIV, an in-game message from the dev team, which delivered items that were required for the player to be able to obtain his Zanuck and Abe's outfit, referred to the echoes of Tidus' maniacal laughter. In World of Final Fantasy, upon arriving in Besaid, Lan does his own version of Tidus' laugh, which Rain then decides to ignore because she doesn't know how to react to it, and to be honest, I don't blame her. While Final Fantasy VII's affection system is probably the most well-known and notorious example of such a system in the series, it's not the only one. Final Fantasy X's affection system is a hidden element of the gameplay which influences a number of cutscenes in the game, which we'll look at in a minute. First, however, let's look at how the characters' affection values are determined in the first place. Each of the main characters, except for Tidus, has an affection value that can be influenced by decisions that you make throughout Final Fantasy X, and they all start from 0 at the beginning of the game. It's possible to alter these values, either positively or negatively, by taking actions during battles. If Tidus heals another member of the party, then that character's affection value towards him increases by 1 point. Similarly, if Tidus throws himself in front of an enemy's attack using guard or sentinel, then that also boosts the protected character's affection by 1. On the other hand, if Tidus attacks one of his fellow party members, that will knock their affection rating down by 1 point. However, characters' affection ratings are also determined by the many conversations that take place during the course of the game. During the scenes where characters are spread across an area, and you can choose who to talk to and in what order, the first person that Tidus speaks with will have their affection rating boosted by a predetermined number of points, depending on the character. Any subsequent conversations with other characters in the same area will not offer a similar increase. While you would be forgiven for assuming that Yuna offers the greatest number of opportunities to increase her affection towards Tidus, that honour actually passes to Lulu. There are 88 conversation events of this nature that take place during Final Fantasy X, though some of them are unavoidable, so certain characters will always see their favourability ratings increase at certain points. Let's take a look at some notable examples of times when this comes into play. After speaking with Yuna for the first time in Besaid Village, Wakka asks Tidus if he thinks she's cute. Replying with "yeah" will increase Yuna's affection rating by 8 points. When you're on the SS Winnow, there are a few different ways you can influence the affection values, depending on the order in which you do things. For example, watching the conversation between Yuna and the Luca goers first will boost her rating by 4 points, whereas if you eavesdrop on Lulu talking to Wakka 4 times, then you will increase both of their affection ratings instead. Another area where you can have a significant effect on the values is, of course, during the scenes that take place in Guado Salam, after Riku has also joined the team. Depending on which character has the most affection points by then, Tidus will speak to either Lulu or Riku after Yuna has entered Seymour's manor. If Tidus ends up talking to Lulu, when she says don't fall in love with Yuna, you can choose to either boost Yuna's favourability towards him by replying with "too late", or you can increase Lulu's rating by 8 points if he responds with "You're more my type." When you reach the Thunder Plains, if you take pity on poor old Riku and enter the travel agency before Auron gives in, that will increase her rating by 8 points. You can also increase it again if you wish to, by talking with her inside the agency before Tidus goes into Yuna's room. You can also give Auron's favourability a boost if, when you chat to Rin and he asks "Would that be Sir Auron by any chance?", you respond with "Nope, wrong guy." Anyway, that's probably enough examples for the time being. So what impact do affection mechanics actually have in Final Fantasy X? Well, while there is not a dating aspect in the game like there is in Final Fantasy VII, the favourability ratings determine which character Tidus will speak to in certain scenes, as well as an element of his final overdrive, Blitz Ace. As already mentioned, the first such scene is in Guado Salam, whereby Tidus will converse with either Riku or Lulu. If they both happen to have the same number of points, Lulu takes priority. The second scene that is influenced by the affection system takes place at Lake Macalania, after the boss battle against the Crawler Machina. When Tidus rides towards the temple, he'll be joined by either Auron, Kamari, Lulu or Riku, depending on the character's values, and in the case of a tie, Lulu is given priority again. Next is the scene on the Fahrenheit, after the boss battles against Sin's Fins. The character with the greatest favourability will talk with Tidus before they jump off the airship towards Sin. This time, in the event of a tie, the priority unsurprisingly goes to Yuna. Funnily enough, even if Waka was the one to jump off first, he will always be the character who lands on Sin last, after the others. The fourth and final brief story scene that can be determined by the affection system takes place on the bridge of the airship after defeating Sin's core. After Brother has spoken to Tidus, the scene will finish with him talking to the character who has the highest affection rating. As mentioned a few minutes ago, the affection mechanics also play a role in deciding who throws the ball to Tidus during his Blitz Ace overdrive. The only characters who are eligible to do this are Yuna, Lulu and Riku, and if the one with the highest affinity with Tidus is unavailable because of story reasons or they're knocked out, the character with the next highest rating will throw it instead. However, if all three of them are unavailable, then rather than having one of the guys throw it to Tidus, the Blitzball will instead magically appear out of nowhere. As Blitz Ace can also be performed underwater, if Riku has a lower value than Yuna and Lulu, the ball will just appear again, rather than being thrown by her. And lastly, on the subject of the affection system, going back to the fact that it can be influenced by decisions you make during battles, if you wish to, then you can basically bypass the points gained from conversations in order to increase or decrease a character's affinity with Tidus. The most straightforward way to boost a person's affection value is by healing that character only using Tidus. For example, if he throws about 30 or so potions at the character you want him to have the greatest affinity with, that will probably do the trick. And finally, let's wrap up by going over a few interesting, miscellaneous bits of info. One of the things that inspired the direction that Final Fantasy X took was Nojima's desire to create a game that centered around being a journey. He added that he thought that Final Fantasy VIII had been a bit too convenient when it came to travelling around, so he wanted the world of Final Fantasy X to be more inconvenient in comparison, so that it would feel like it was a real pilgrimage. Katase has also shared the same sentiment, saying that journey is the main theme that runs through the story, but alongside that there are many hidden themes. He added that, from his point of view, the theme of family stands out, saying, "I'm the father of 2 children, and so from that standpoint, I can relate to that theme. But others might relate more to the relationship between Yuna and Tidus. In this way, I feel that there are many hidden themes that could surface, depending on the player and his or her experiences." On this subject, Katase has also said that the only time he'd ever cried while test playing a game during his career was with Final Fantasy X, and he praised the scenario and actors' performances. When asked about her favourite character, Fumi Nakashima, the game's sub-character chief designer, chose Keeper from the Besaid Aurochs, because he's the only chubby player on the team, which makes him stand out and look cute. Nojima said that, to him, sin represents the obstacles encountered in life, and the notion of giving up without overcoming them when faced with such challenges. Hiroshi Kuwabara, Final Fantasy X's FMV director, revealed that the amount of time taken to render the game's FMVs varied greatly. While the shortest time was around 2 to 3 weeks, it could often take as long as 1 or 2 months, with the longest scene taking about half a year to render. Katase made an interesting comment about the potential link between Final Fantasy VII and FF10 during a discussion about the fan theory that Final Fantasy VIII's Rinoa ultimately becomes Ultimecia. While he was giving views on that theory, he said that while Nojima was working on Final Fantasy X, he created a character named Shinra, with the idea that he could share a connection to Final Fantasy VII's Shinra. He also added that Nojima is the type of person who likes adding suggestive details like that. Psychologist Carl Jung put forward the idea that every man carries within him the eternal image of woman. He also said that, since this image is unconscious, it is always unconsciously projected upon the person of the beloved, and stated that he had called this image the anima. It's interesting to consider the relationship between Seymour and his mother along the lines of Jung's concept, given that he consciously uses the power of anima to further his own ambitions, perhaps having forgotten over time exactly how the Aeon came into being or what it represents, and merely seeing it as his to control. Although he does acknowledge the Aeon if anima is summoned in the final battle against him. Seymour's mother later says, "I wanted to give him the strength to live by himself, and so I became a faith, but because I let him taste power, he began to thirst for more." It's also ironic that his mother, as anima, helped Seymour to become stronger, yet in the end she pleads with Yuna to destroy sin and my son's obsession with it. And given that this is the last point to be covered in this video, it seems apt to discuss the ending of Final Fantasy X too. While the game is well known for having multiple endings, there is also an extended game over scene that can be viewed if you don't win the final battle against Vegnagun, which essentially acts as a kind of bad ending to the game. In the sequence, Vegnagun unleashes a blast into the sky from its cannon. We then see people gathered at the Calmlands, seemingly unaware of exactly what's about to happen, before the energy unleashed by Vegnagun destroys the Calmlands and presumably all of Spira as well. It's certainly a dramatic way to lose the game. Okay then, that just about wraps up this video. Please do let me know which facts you found most interesting by leaving a comment below. Also, do you have any interesting facts of your own about Final Fantasy X that you would like to share? If you do, then it would be great to read those as well. And if you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe as well if you aren't already. Finally, if you want to see more videos about Final Fantasy, it would be great if you could support me on Patreon. I'll leave the link in the description. Anyway, until next time, thank you for watching.